J.D. Glickman. I'm the artistic director of Actor Studio Stockholm, and I am also a teacher at the school. I'm directing theater both in Stockholm as well as New York City. I also teach in New York City and here too, and I'm also an actor. So I primarily work with the Michael Chekhov system. That's a system that I studied in college. And I feel how that helps us as actors is it really awakens our imagination. And in doing so, and when we can really hear that imagination within ourselves, that really inspires us. And ultimately, we begin to be able to get to a place where we surprise ourselves. And that can be a very powerful thing to experience and work with on stage or in film and TV. We've been working really closely with all of our students. A lot of our students have different goals, but many of the goals is to go on to study at Scenskolan and get into the universities, whether they're in Stockholm or even abroad. So we've had a very good track record of helping our students get into Stockholm, Scenskolan, or all of them actually, Luleå, Malmö, and Gothenburg, as well as schools in New York City, whether it's the Lee Strasberg Studio, the Stella Adler School, or the Chekhov Studio, or Washington University. One of our students is there right now in Seattle. We teach and instruct many different systems and provide different approaches. And we also recognize that there's not one way to do this. There's not the way to do it. There's a way to do it. And what we find by working with these different systems is that our students will find their way eventually to do it. And after working for a long period of time and gaining confidence and becoming more comfortable with yourself, you eventually will get on the stage. You'll perform in English in one showcase, and you'll perform in Swedish in another showcase. You'll also make your own films. So it's about taking a period of time and learning the craft, learning something about yourselves, and then applying that in performance. We do recognize and understand that the students that are coming in are all at different levels. And it's not about, what it really becomes about is commitment. So if we recognize that someone's very committed, but they might not have had as much experience, we want that person to come into the school and learn something about the craft. I personally feel that style comes from individuality, and that this really the individuality that needs to be supported and worked with. I don't want a specific style to come out of a specific actor. I want to see who they really are and let that come through. That will then become their style. Vulnerability and knowing their lines. My philosophy really comes down to really listening to what it is you feel like you need to do. Technique can help us and support us in ways of how we do that, but really slowing down enough to listen to what risks do you really want to take in a classroom? What risks do you really want to take up on the stage? What do you really want to take when you're being filmed in a television series or a film? That ultimately, becoming comfortable with that is really something that is going to probably make for a more compelling actor. And I'm very interested in the truth of revealing through the risk-taking. What I'd like students who graduate from Actor Studio Stockholm is to take with them is a confidence, an understanding of a set of tools that they've learned that's like a toolbox that they can actually be out on their own and say, hey, I remember something that I was doing in class, and I can take that tool out of the toolbox and I can apply it with this director or these other actors that I don't even know. That like a bird that's just been born eventually is going to fly off on its own and, take that leap of faith and be able to say, hey, I know what to do now. That's a great thing to hear about when actors do graduate and they go off and they start, working, whether they're on stage right across the street from here at Playhouse Theater or Dramaten or City Theater or theaters throughout Sweden or abroad, which they do. and film and TV as well. They've taken what they've learned and they're flying now out there in the world with it. And that's why I do this, to help them understand something about that and to become actors. I think professionally, craft, confidence. Personally, it's all about personal development, them learning something about themselves, their emotional life, and then moving into a performance with all of that and developing a career. I think talent is kind of a funny thing to try to define. I think training is extremely important. This is a craft, just like any craftsperson, whether you're a carpenter or what have you. So it's very important to learn the tools. Eventually you'll take technique and the tools and you'll throw them out the window, and you'll really just be out there flying with all of these behind you and within your instrument. So I would say it's very important that an actor puts in a lot of time to learn the craft of that through the training and then be free. I find no difference at all whatsoever. I think that you have to know something about the craft of acting, and you can make adjustments, whether you're on stage and you're putting the energy through a big hole like this, or you're on film and you put the energy through a smaller hole. But I really find no difference. I think the most rewarding thing about teaching are the breakthroughs. To see a student come in and not really be aware or understand what's going on, and trust that they're in a process, that they're in a safe space at Actors Studio Stockholm, which we work very hard to create. Learn my lines. I mean, it might come off like not really sounding important, but it's so important. You know, I mean, if you don't know your lines, you really can't play. And it's so freeing to be able to work in a situation where feel like you're improvising, even though you have written text. And so I would say this is really important advice that I got. And, you know, just stay true to what it is you feel that you really want to do. Well, I mean, versatility is extremely important especially if you want to be like a character actor. But not all of us are character actors. A lot of us are just going to play more versions of ourselves. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. Versatility is important, but I don't think it is the only thing as it relates to an actor knowing what they want to do. Meaning, if you're going to be a character actor, then you should be very versatile. But if you're going to be cast as something very close to you, you can be versatile within that range of yourself. It's all about being in the zone. It's all about a zone. And a lot of times what happens is we're put on the spot, and then suddenly we're out of the zone. And we're aware of the camera, and we're aware of you, and we're aware of this guy over here who's going to be interviewed next. And I'm not in the moment. And so to really get in the moment, to be versatile, to really get in the moment, to live in the truth of this, all the things that we want to do, is to really be able to concentrate and focus. And it's something that we learn as we work with these different exercises. It's part of being an actor, and it's a very important part of being an actor. Compelling. There's an exercise called the relaxation exercise. And it's an exercise designed to not necessarily relax as we know the word, but to really come into oneself. And I feel that there's all different techniques and approaches into doing that, but this one really works with voice, body, and emotion in a very interesting way that permits the actor to hear internally what's going on. I remember working with atmosphere work in a group of actors, and atmospheres is when we imagine that a space is filled with something. It could be like chaotic car accident, We're not acting like we're in a chaotic car accident, but we're just understanding something about how we react to that idea in our imagination, and we start to live in the space with it. We weren't working on chaotic car accident. I don't really recall exactly what we were working with, but I remember that this young man started to take his shirt off, and then he started to take his pants off. He left his underwear on, and then he was living in a way that he never knew he would or could. He was surprising himself over and over again. And then I called for the exercise to be over. And then his face became red and flush, and he got so embarrassed because it was like we turned the lights on. And I looked at him and I said, "What's going on?" And he said, he hid behind a curtain, and he just came out with his head, and he said, "I'm afraid." And I said, "Great." It's not about finding the way. It's about finding a way to do the work. It's really about getting into this space and working hard. Yeah, don't be polite in this work. You don't have, there's nothing personal, and you don't have to be polite. Dare to be private in public on the stage. I see our students daring to be private in public every day, to different degrees, more and more and more. As you go on through this program, you will dare to become more and more private in public, and then you will be like, bring it on. Oh.
What prior experience do you have? Like what acting?
I've never acted in my life. I have no idea what's, do you know what's going on? I have no idea. Puppet acting. Hi, how are you? What?
What schools have you gone to?
What schools have I gone to? I studied at New York University. I got my degrees in acting and directing. I was at the Michael Chekhov studio in New York City and Los Angeles. I studied at the William Esper studio with Susanna Esper in New York City. I studied at the Lee Strasberg studio. I studied at the Stella Adler School of Acting in New York City. I studied with Tony Greco, who taught at NYU and has his own program. I studied with Daryl Hickman in Los Angeles. I studied with Lisa Dalton and Beatrice Straight at the Michael Chekhov studio. So I've studied at a lot of studios over the years just to understand all these different systems and how they all work together. And that's what we brought to some of those to Actors Studio Stockholm.